What if the degree you earned isn't something you apply, but something you become? Today, our guest challenges a belief so many of us carry that our work has to directly match what we studied in college. Naomi has a music degree, and while she may not be using it in the traditional sense, she's absolutely using the skills it gave her every single day. Because the truth is, those skills are transferable. In this conversation, we get into burnout, hustle culture, and why the constant pressure to do more might finally be starting to fade. Naomi didn't just experience burnout, she studied it. And what she found goes deeper than workload or compensation. Let's roll right in. All right. Welcome to the Work Sucks, But I Like It podcast. Today we have Naomi Asher. She's a leadership speaker, coach, and nonprofit strategist who helps leaders stop burning out and start understanding each other. She is the founder of the Maven Consulting and also a recent doctoral graduate studying executive burnout risk factors. Naomi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, awesome. So, first question, Naomi, I like to ask our guests is how do you define work today? How do you define it?
Wow, that's a great question. Honestly, I think that there's a move back towards working to live, not living to work. And so work, I think, while I do, and I talk about this a lot, I think that work needs to be connected to passion and it needs to be connected to purpose. I also think that work is a paycheck and we need to get back to working to live and not living to work.
I love that. It's almost like the three P's you said there. So, we got paycheck, passion, and purpose. Walk us through how you sort of integrate this definition of work into your day now.
So it's interesting working for myself and starting my own business because it used to be very structured. Work was much more, and even though I've always um, had a little bit of overwork habit, um, I think now it's so much more enmeshed into my life where, like, I took a nap today and I don't feel bad about it because I'm probably going to be working tomorrow. So my whole life now is just kind of intermingled, I think, with work. However, I'm able to prioritize family and friends and things in a way that I haven't been able to before. And so I think it's all about finding the right balance. And that balance looks very different from person to person. I love working on Sunday nights. I love feeling like on Monday I'm organized, but that's me. That's not everybody. And so I think it's all about finding that right balance.
So, just so we can get clear and the audience clear here as well. So, one of the things, Naomi, I've been noticing on the show, guests coming on, there's sort of two categories with work, right? We have people that work a 9 to 5 and people that are entrepreneurs. Where do you consider yourself to be? Even like
Definitely an
those terms that I'm
entrepreneur.
using.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. An entrepreneur for sure.
gotcha. So let's take a step back. So were you an entrepreneur your whole life or did you work a 9 to 5 first?
So I've got 2 decades of experience in nonprofit leadership, and so I would say I was not 9 to 5, um, but yeah, it was much more of a clock in, clock out. However, when you work in nonprofit, especially because so many people that you work with are volunteering their time, it becomes very all-consuming where you wanna make sure that you're available as the CEO to your board members or volunteers when they're not working, and so those 9 to 5 boundaries get really messy, and then, obviously, with fundraising and events and things of that nature, that flows over into your weekends, and so it can become very, unmanageable, and that's part of why my dissertation focuses on, nonprofit burnout, because I do not believe that it is.
So I definitely want to explore your dissertation because I think that's really cool. But one thing, just because I'm curious, what are your thoughts around work-life balance? Is that sort of the equation we should be thinking about?
Yeah, I think that balance is an interesting word. I don't know that we ever reach that on a day to day, but I do think when we look at our lives on a grander scheme, um, that there needs to be balance in terms of years that you really spend investing in your family and your friends and your personal life, and then years that you're investing in your career and in education and things of that nature. So, on the day to day, I don't know that there's any kind of like balance. I think some people maybe feel like they've achieved that, but I don't know that we consider work-life balance in the best light or in the best way. I don't know that it's attainable for most people, in a majority of their life.
So now, yes, now I really want to go into your dissertation here. So walk us through first why you wanted to do your PhD. Because right now I'm working on mine and I'm just would love to hear why you wanted to start this like long process, right? Of doing this work. What got you
Yeah.
into it?
Man, I don't even remember anymore. It was a terrible idea. I'm just kidding. Uh, I really wanted to I think and this is a stupid reason, but I'm gonna start here. I wanted to kind of prove to myself that I could do it. I'm the not a first generation in my family for higher education, but first female, to pursue higher education. And so for me, when I got my master's degree, I was the only one of our kids, or only one of my parents' kids, that had an advanced degree. And then I was like, well, why stop here? And so it just kind of continued to plague me that like there's something else I can do, that I could um, kind of prove to myself and others, like, that are family. Like, I feel like it's carrying family legacy a little bit. I think it's I'm a foster parent, and so I wanted to prove to my kids, especially my teenage girls, that they can do whatever they set their mind to. And so, I've never considered myself that intellectual or that intelligent, but I wanted to prove that if you work hard, you can do it.
So I guess what was your undergrad and did you do your master's? Like I'm just curious how you got into this sort of like area.
Yeah, my undergrad is in music and theology.
Oh, I love that even more. That's amazing, actually.
Yeah, I was going to do music ministry actually when I was in my undergrad, and then that never happened. It just by the time I graduated, I was not interested in working in a church, and I took a bunch of short term jobs that kind of gave me all kinds of skills, and all of those skills when I had just got married, and talking to one of my clients. I was a personal trainer for a while, and I was talking to one of my clients, and she ran a temp agency, and she said, "Oh, I've got this organization. I think you'd be great." And she said, "Nobody gets along with the director, and she's gone through all of these office managers, and I think you should go down there." And I was like, "All right. I mean, I'll give it a go." So I went down. We had a great conversation. She ended up being one of my biggest advocates and a mentor to me for many years. Taught me everything that I know. Um, and I just didn't know that nonprofit was even a thing. Like, I honestly had no idea that there were nonprofit organizations out there, that there were organizations doing such great work. And so I said, "Yeah, I would love to work here." Ended up being there under her for 2 years, and then I took over as the CEO when she retired a few years later. And so it was crazy, and it was very fast and wild way to get into nonprofit management. But I was there for a total of 7 years, and then went to a larger nonprofit for the next 10 years. And because I had a music degree, right, I just kept feeling like this is crazy. I've got no business doing this. And so I started my master's degree shortly after I took over as the CEO for that smaller organization. Um, and that really just put me, so I got my MBA. I didn't want to do a nonprofit management program. I really wanted to get my MBA. So I did my MBA specialized in marketing, and just loved it. I was really interested in it. And then um, when I started looking at PhD programs and doctoral programs, I found this one through Carolina University, and it's organizational management and community leadership. And that was just perfectly in line with what I wanted to do and what I had been doing. And so it felt like it was really calling to me, and that it was the right next move.
It's so funny, Naomi, that, people when they get their college degrees, society today makes it seem like, oh, if you can't readily apply music theory to whatever job, it's like a useless thing. Why do we think that? Because I feel I love music, right? So I'm a drummer in a
Yeah.
band. I look at people of having their song and dance, right? I actually think like music is like a good thing to study, right? Why do you think society does that to us?
No, it drives me nuts actually, because 'cause I've been thinking about
I
that
know, right?
so far, like, so many times along my career journey, I've thought, "I have all this work experience and all of this educational experience that it's unrelated," but I think that it has made me much more well-rounded, and all of those skills are transferable, and I will say I remember when I was getting my undergrad, people said, "It doesn't matter what you do as long as you have a degree." And I think
Mm,
there is some truth to that. Obviously, I'm not gonna go be a nuclear engineer or something with a music degree, but, um, but I think we've forgotten just that we learn so many skills that are transferable, and that when we are more well-rounded, we are better employees really in any workspace, and so I think there's definitely benefit to it, and we need to you and I are gonna take on the burden of making sure people understand that.
I love that, right? Changing the language around work, absolutely. So one of the things we like to say in the show, Naomi, is that success is not a matter of good luck, it's good skills. What skill would you say from your let's start with your undergrad degree in music that you've applied like in your life?
I think definitely not backing down from a challenge. It was music theory is hard,
I'm sure it is.
and out of
It sounds it.
I think there were 20 people that started, and I was the only person that graduated on time.
Holy smokes. Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
and and it was and it was like most of them dropped out, and then we had one other that graduated, I think, 1 semester or maybe a year after me, but it was like it's so hard, and it's just not what you expect. Like, if you love music, even if you play music, like I was a voice major and, played piano and guitar, violin, music theory is just still really hard. It's so much harder, I think, than
Mm.
anybody anticipates it being, and so that and then sight singing and, I like there are just so many challenges to it that, just caught me completely off guard, but I was not gonna back down and just double down on working hard, and that's the thing is I would not say that I am anywhere close to the talent level that usually goes into a music degree, but I worked really hard. And I think that's been a consistent thing throughout my life is that I may not be, you know, the most naturally gifted at things, but I will work hard until I can get it and do it. And that's what I want to inspire in other, especially other like teenagers and girls entering the workforce.
So organizational leadership, so why did you want to study what you studied in terms of burnout? Walk us through
Yeah.
that scenario of you said, "Wait a minute, we need to research this and figure out a solution."
Yeah.
What was
I
that?
was I was seeing so many leaders in nonprofits burning out, and I started my degree program in 2020, and so definitely through that, there were a lot of additional challenges, and it's just like when you look at any of these statistics from that time, the divorce rates were really high. Well, I don't think that COVID caused divorce, but I think that it did force people to deal with things that they maybe hadn't or to face things that maybe they hadn't. And so the same was true with the nonprofit community. So many nonprofits were spread so thin, they were really challenged to step up to take a stand on how the organization positions itself in the community on multiple issues, and funding got really difficult. Um, I remember it was some of the hardest times of my life. Like I was delivering cleaning supplies to people. I was working at vaccination clinics. I was working with community members hand sewing masks and getting those delivered. Like, it was just absolutely wild and how quickly we had to pivot to be relevant and serving the needs of the community. Well, then what we saw was a couple years after, so maybe, 23, 24, it was almost like PTSD of like, we went through this experience and then we just didn't talk about it. And it was kind of like, yeah, everything's back to normal. And I remember thinking, life will never be the same again. We all said that. It will never be the same again. We're not going to have these huge concerts and these festivals. Like, we're never going back to that because it's just too risky in the world now. And it was like, boom, light switch, everything's reopened, everything's fine, everything's 100% back to normal. And it was like, did that happen? Did we have that experience? Did we live through that? And it's almost like this blank spot in so many people's memories. And that contributed so heavily, I think, to burnout because we went from a time of, for a lot of people, a time of slowdown because we couldn't overload our schedules because there just weren't events and things to be going to and things to be shoving into our lives. And then as quickly as everything shut down, it ramped back up. And that pile on of activity, I think, was so overwhelming, and we didn't give ourselves space for that whiplash that it started causing significant burnout, which was already a problem in nonprofit leadership. So this is the thing is when you look at nonprofit leaders, they're some of the highest for um, substance misuse, for embezzlement and risky behaviors, for suicide, for because they're carrying the compassion fatigue of the nursing and medical field while also carrying the pressure of keeping people employed for, like, the business community. And so I could talk about this for hours.
But I love your unique perspective on this because it's interesting how you use kind of COVID slowing down and then we're thrown back in 100%. And that's like kind of like, would you say it's like we forgot what to do or we just feel like we're making up for the time that we weren't doing something, especially in this hustle culture? Can you
Mhm.
explain more of that? Because I really like this unique angle on this.
Yeah, absolutely, and I love that you said hustle culture because I talk about that a lot. It's yeah, I think I remember right before COVID, I was just like, "Man, I've got stuff every single night," and then there was this huge shutdown of it, so that then when it started ramping back up, and I remember being in nonprofit and being in fundraising and development, thinking, well, we've got to do this event. Where can we fit it in? Because there's all these other things going on. And then attendance started going down. And now what we see, interestingly, is RSVPs, like, for the wedding industry, for events, for concert sales, for all of these things. Tickets are not selling in advance. People don't wanna commit like that anymore, and I think that is part of it because we forgot how to balance. I think then we have a whole generation, um or at least a chunk of a generation that never learned how to balance it because they could do school in their room and get a whole day done in 4 hours, and there were no after school activities to participate in. And now they don't know how to balance. Whereas I look back on my years in high school and I was in like every after school extracurricular, plus I worked 20 hours a week selling, at a retail store. And so you think about that inability then to carry all of these things in that schedule. I think we will see a significant shift away from the hustle culture and celebrating and overly um, appreciating people who do too much. I think that's going to shift drastically in the next 10 years or so.
So, Naomi, walk us through the hypothesis for your dissertation now. Tell us like what group of participants you were studying and what you were trying to find in your study.
Yeah, so I'm looking at nonprofit leaders, so CEOs of any size nonprofit organization. I've been able to drill down within the data that I've got from my surveys to look at different sizes, and there's a lot that I could get into with that, but I'll hold back on that for now.
But maybe another time on
But
another episode for
yeah.
sure. Yeah, I love it. I love it.
So I'm looking at the job demands resources model, that survey, and then Maslow's burnout inventory and how they work together and how they play together. And one of the things that I was going into this in my mind knowing is I do not believe that it is just workload and compensation that is burning out nonprofit professionals, because I do not think most nonprofit professionals are motivated by money after a base amount, right? Like you
Sure.
shouldn't be impoverished. But after a certain level, I do not think that they're financially motivated, and I do not think that they get burned out from overwork because I was working a huge amount of hours, and so were all my counterparts. This is not unique to me, that were fully in the mission and loved it and were so happy working 50, 60 hours a week. So I do not believe that it's overwork or compensation. And sure enough, the things that are hitting the hardest are upward growth mobility, opportunities for learning and development, those types of things, which especially for female nonprofit leaders, those are capped pretty quick. And that's where we see the most burnout effect, is when we don't have opportunities to learning and development, when we don't have upward mobility, the perception of it. And so that's really what we're seeing cause a lot of that burnout. And then it's mission alignment. And kind of the tail end of my story is when I started this program and this research, I didn't feel burned out at all. I took a job change to go to a large nonprofit. It was just not a good alignment. I thought that it was. We all thought it was a good fit. It was not a good fit. Within 6 months, I've never been so burned out. I've never felt worse. I didn't wanna get up in the mornings. I couldn't find any motivation. I couldn't, it just everything was so wrong. And it was a values alignment. It was the
Could you
values that
walk us through, sorry, some of those
yeah.
values, please? Sorry. Yeah, this is,
No, no, no.
what were
Yeah,
some that stood out
absolutely.
for you?
Yeah. So the way that that I operate in the world as far as how I believe others should be treated was not in alignment with the way that the organization did that. So,
Can you give an example? I know you gotta save face here with some people, but can you give us some detail?
yeah.
A little bit?
Um, so for me, if we're talking about, and it's not, I try so hard not to get into politics and stuff, but when we're it's not for me, it's not a political issue to treat a kid who is, like, gender dysmorphia or whatever. If you are presenting that, it's not it's not a political issue to treat that kid, like, with humanity and acceptance and
Yeah.
love. I recognize and understand that if your value system does not allow for that.
Would you say they're thinking more in terms of the business side? Can I be that sort of cold, or is it not that black and white?
Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah, I think it was that, and I think it was just honestly of significant values misalignment where I felt like um, the organization was taking on the values of a person versus the organization's values. So where the
That's a
organizational
great
values may
distinction.
have been in alignment, I feel like in reality, it was not. And that's unfortunate. And it wasn't the whole organization, but it was definitely present in leadership discussion. Um, and that was just really difficult. And then I think too, when you have an organization that size, the way that finances are handled, decisions on that level, that structural level as far as looking at rural areas and service versus urban and where dollars are allocated and what we're doing with those dollars, what contracts look like, what an RFP process looks like. It was not in alignment with the way that I was comfortable and the way that I had been doing it. And so we don't have clear RFP processes, if we don't have, some of those things, which again, I understand relationships and all of that comes into play, but it was just it was honestly a values misalignment. I'm not saying that it was wrong or unethical. It just did not line up with the with the values that I have around those things.
But interestingly enough, you found that same sort of, discovery in your dissertation, right? With the
Mhm.
mission alignments, right? So I know in the dissertation, you're kind of just proving out your hypothesis. Were there
Yeah.
some practical things that you were able to sort of learn, uncover, implement, if you will, from that realization of mission alignment and these opportunities for upward mobility?
Yeah, so what's been really cool is getting to work with especially larger nonprofits on internal pipelines. So, how do we, if you have really high turnover, let's see if this makes an impact. And it is making an impact, it's making a huge difference. And so, if you're a large nonprofit and you've got opportunities and you make it clear, and then I've been running leadership development cohorts, so I can come in and work with 10 to 15 of your lower to mid-level employees, teaching those, giving them that learning opportunity for one, helping them with self-awareness and understanding their own values, how that lines up with the organization's values, and then showing them through this skill learning, these are the opportunities that you have within this organization or even with another organization. So you learn these skills and you've got opportunity to move up with other organizations. And it's made a really big impact. I'm so proud of the leaders of this organization and so thankful that they gave me the opportunity to come in and do this. And it's really, really cool. And I'm looking forward to rolling that out on a bigger scale with other nonprofits and businesses. I think all of this is transferable to the business community as well.
Oh, 100%. So, Naomi, in that particular sort of, I call it a study, I guess, if you will, when you work with this group, so this is the Work Sucks, but I Like It podcast. What sucked about that work? And what did you do to make it not suck, right? There's always this, friction, frustration with the work we do sometimes. How did you sort of resolve that and smooth it out?
Man, I don't know how to answer this because honestly, I loved that whole process. I've
Fair
loved
enough.
doing this piece
Sunday
of it.
night work and all. Yeah, no, I
I
gotcha.
know.
Yeah.
I hate the admin side of it, but there's nothing I can do about that, and I just have to
Okay.
do it
That's still part
anyways.
of it. Yeah.
I think my hardest starting this company and, and working for myself, the hardest piece has actually been sales, which is crazy because
Ugh,
I love fundraising and I have never had a problem with sales, but I can sell for somebody else all day long. There's something different about selling for yourself.
I feel you on
Um,
that. Yeah.
and so that's the part that sucks. What has made it easier is really knowing, especially now after being given these opportunities, this absolutely works. It is moving the needle on retention, on engagement, on honestly just happiness with the individuals. Because if you help somebody really figure out who they are and their behavioral patterns and why they make the decisions that they make and those kinds of things, and you can channel that into being their best self in their workspace, oh, everybody's happier. Everybody's happier, and it's just been really, really cool. And I love knowing that it works.
I love that. Why do you think I feel so similarly, which is so funny because I could sell somebody else's thing, but when I talk about my stuff, I'm like, wait, what? Right? Why do you think sales has such a negative sort of connotation to it? Why do you think that?
Well, I'll say this. I one of my very first jobs when I was personal trainer, The markers for most of our fitness managers, they came in, it's not their fault, it's just the way the system is, right? Their accomplishment markers and what they are measured on is how many training packages. So, like, I'm a good trainer if I sell a bunch, not necessarily if my clients have any results. Now, if your clients have good results, chances are you'll be better at selling, but I was also just very good at sales. So I could sell these training packages. I wasn't necessarily the best trainer, but I could sell a training package. And so I ended up being, good in this role. And part of how I got burned out there and why I'm not still doing it was this idea of like, I'm selling to somebody that I know can't afford it and I know doesn't really need it, but I can sell them on it pretty easily if I wanted to.
Mm.
That's what sucks about sales. And I think that's what people imagine in their mind. Like, you think of sales and you think pharmaceutical sales. Well, look at what pharmaceutical sales have done to our country
Yeah,
and to
fair
people.
enough.
Look at how many people get ripped off with a terrible car and you buy a used car and it's the worst. I think that's the connotation, that's the connection that most people make with sales, and it's really unfortunate because there are some really great products and services out there, and I think most of us, especially those of us that are natural salespeople, shy away from it because it's always in the back of our mind, like, "Oh, am I just tricking this person into spending a bunch of money on something that maybe they don't really need?" So,
I feel the same way. That's so funny. So I want to kind of dive into your service, if you will, and the Maven Consulting. Walk us through how you chose the word Maven, and can you define that for the audience here, please?
yeah, so for me, I don't even know how I found the word, but then I looked it up and it was like somebody who shares timely and relevant knowledge with others. And there's more descriptions about um, lived experience. So sharing your lived experience with others. And to me, that was just so beautiful. And it was so clearly what I want to do is, I've got almost 2 decades of leadership experience in a lot of different kind of areas. And I want to help others so they don't have to learn it themselves. Like, I would love to just be able to say, "Hey, here's my experience with this. Here's how we can shortcut you from going through, the quicksand and all of the mess that I had to walk through." And I love that so much. I was not anticipating starting a company when I did. I always knew that I would be doing what I'm doing, but I did think it would be farther down the road. Um, and so the timing just worked, and it's been interesting. It's been a really interesting first year and a half figuring out really where I wanna put my time and kind of hang my shingle, like, what exactly do I want to be doing in these leadership development cohorts and coaching, and then speaking have really become very clear that that's where I not only where I enjoy being, but that is where I thrive, and can bring the most impact and help to others.
Do you have like one sort of like case study that you want to share with the audience with your program? Like, what was this person? Again, I know you can't disclose all the details, but roughly the problem and sort of the solution that you gave this person to have them succeed.
So, interestingly, I didn't seek this out, but I've kind of found myself working with I've got 4 or 5 right now organizations where their leadership do not get along. And I'm an Enneagram coach and didn't really anticipate using the Enneagram the way that I have. And so I just spent, 3, 4 hours with a team. And it was funny because when I did their one-on-one meetings, I was like, man, they all love this organization. They are so passionate and so connected, but their ways of communicating and their behavioral patterns are quite literally the opposite of each other. So they are just constantly making each other angry without even knowing it. And then they're pointing at each other like, why are you a jerk? Nobody is. Nobody is. You're just so incredibly different in the way that you communicate, in the way that you present information, in your motivation, in in your fears, just general fears of the world. And so when you take all of that into consideration about other people, we're different generationally, we're different a lot of the time racially and ethnically and culturally. If we grow up in middle class or in poverty, all of these things give you such a different frame and lived experience that completely changes how you view a situation. And so I was talking to somebody that I went to high school with, and she was talking about something that happened at our school. We were both there, standing close to each other, witnessing the exact same event. And her experience was so wildly different. Her feelings, her interpretation, like all of it was so wildly different. And if I can help people understand that piece, just that you treat other people the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated, because they're a different person. Talk to this person the way they want to be spoken to. You, while we're not responsible for somebody's perception, the perception is reality, and we need to do everything that we possibly can to convey the intent behind our message and not just the words, because the words are 50% of the communication. So that is the space that I am currently just loving, and I've got 4 or 5 teams that have just had huge growth, and communication, um, like, improvement through
So what
working
was the one
in
thing
these
that you would
teams.
attribute to that? You mentioned you're versed in the Enneagram, right? So I think I'm a 3. Does that
Okay.
mean that the achiever, right?
Yep,
I've taken it years ago.
yep.
Did you use the Enneagram in that particular example?
Mhm.
Like, you
Yes.
okay, perfect. Can you walk us through kinda I guess, first of all, what is the Enneagram for listeners? They might not know what that is. Can you talk about that and how you used it?
Yeah, so the Enneagram, I hate calling it a personality typing system, although it is. It is a way to understand your and others', I always say behavioral patterns, honestly. So it looks at your core fear and then your core motivation. And from that, we can anticipate a lot of ways, like triggers and communication patterns, all of those kinds of things from understanding those couple of things. And so, interestingly, since you are a threes, I'm an eight. And so the
Okay.
eight is the challenger. Threes like to control the narrative, right? So a personality three's core fear is going to be not achieving, being rejected. I want to make sure that everything looks the way that I want it to look. And eight finds that absolutely impossible.
Mm.
What you see is what you get. An eight is going to challenge everything. And so we want our biggest fear is deception and somebody trying to control us. And so an eight and a three struggle because a three wants to present what I want you to see, and I'm going to try to mirror what it is that you want so that you will like me, so that I can achieve more, so we can hit our goals, we can move faster. And 8 is gonna go, "No, but how do you really feel about it? But what's really going on? What's your
Mm.
actual motivation? What are you trying to control me through mirroring this behavior or through, presenting things in this kind of way? Are you
Don't
framing
worry,
this
I'm
in a
not
way that
selling you
you
on anything.
think?" Exactly, right? Um, so when you think about a team and you've got, let's say an Enneagram 1, the improver, they have got such a clear black and white, right and wrong. If you make the wrong decision is a moral failure. So we've got this kind of improver mindset. Some say the perfectionist mindset, um, where especially for a nonprofit or a mission driven organization, if we're not doing something right and correct, we could be audited and our organization will be shut down. So, my interpretation of the mission, vision, values, and how I'm going to contribute is going to be based in integrity, truth, right and wrong, keeping everybody structured, accountability, those kinds of things. Then you take a 3. Well, we have to make sure that this organization looks the best so that we can sell it to the community, so that we can hit our milestones, so we can achieve more, so we can have good ads and all of these good things, right? So it's got to look shiny, good, because if it doesn't, nobody will support it and there won't be an organization anymore.
Mm.
And 8, who also loves the organization, who's also bought into the mission, is going to come in and say, all right, we've got the social justice issue. So if anybody is downtrodden, the 8 is the protector. So we will be looking at the client base, or um, even if it's a for-profit company, it would be a department that maybe is overlooked or something like that. So the 8 is going to say, if we're not existing to make this person's life better, there's no point in us existing at all. So I will break the rules and burn the whole thing down if I think it's not in line with what we exist to do. A 3 is gonna break the rules to make sure that it looks the way that it's supposed to, because that's what's important when you're selling to the community or when you're building your reputation, all of those things. But a 1 doesn't care what it looks like. Ultimately, um, everybody's working towards the bottom line and the mission, but a 1 will always prioritize truth, structure, those kinds of things, right? So we're all looking at the same issue, the same situation so completely differently that it causes such significant communication issues, because in your mind, if you're an Enneagram 1, you would never understand how could an Enneagram 8 just break the rules? You're unethical and it's a moral failure because you're breaking the rules. But an eight's going to say, how could you be so stuck on this rule when the rule is broken? The rule is preventing us from doing what we need to do. The rule is the problem. Therefore, I don't care about it. Of course, I'm going to break it. And that mindset can cause the biggest, I mean, it will rip. We've seen it rip churches apart. It's ripped government apart. It's ripped businesses apart. It's torn organizations that serve clients apart. It's and it all comes down to that. So once we can learn to understand where somebody else is coming from and find a way that we can all maintain our values and maintain our voice and what we bring to the situation, if we can respect the positives that somebody else is bringing, it it makes a whole new level of just incredible ability to function and serve more, hit higher, vision bigger, all of those things.
I love that. I love that like live, kind of breakdown of our relationship here. That was super cool. Naomi, the 3 and the 8 and the strengths and I guess things to think about too. But that was amazing. It's been a pleasure, Naomi, having you on the show. If people want to learn more about their Enneagram, or need that timely knowledge from you, where's a good place for them to land?
They can come to my website, naomithemaven.com. I am also on all the social medias, and I love just jumping on calls and talking to people. So, I'm very easy to access.
Awesome, Naomi. Thanks for jumping on this call and doing this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been so fun.
You don't need to match your degree to your job. You need to connect your work to your passion. Naomi reminds us that burnout isn't just about working too much, it's about misalignment. No growth, no opportunity, no connection to the mission. That's when things really start to break down. And maybe balance isn't about perfectly splitting your time every day. Maybe it's about zooming out and asking, am I investing what actually matters? Family, friends, growth, purpose. Some days that might mean working on a Sunday night to set yourself up for success. Other days it means stepping away completely. Because at the end of the day, we're not here to live to work. We're here to work so we can actually live. Success isn't about luck, it's about skills. And today's skill, continuing to show up and work at it until it clicks. Is your work aligned with who you are becoming? If not, what's one small step you can take to move closer? As always, work might suck, but you can still learn to like it. See you next time.